Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis. A very important set of topics will be discussed today. Before we do that, we have three important announcements. One, for anyone who's preparing for 2025, there's a very interesting opportunity which comes to you on January the 26th between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. You can become a part of the Unacademy All India Prelims mock test, UAIPMT. This is going to be a very interesting set of questions which will allow you to get an All India rank. Over and above that, you will also be able to understand your performance. For anybody who's 2025, an important opportunity to assess your preparation for 2026 to understand the pattern. Good morning to all of you. Thereafter, I have reiterated this yesterday also. I'm again based on the success of the Bangalore seminar in Hyderabad. Mukesh sir and Sarmad sir are coming on 25th of January at 11 a.m. in the Federation Hall in Hyderabad. So you can find all the details in this QR code. You can scan it, and I encourage whoever is in Hyderabad to go there and become a part of this seminar and understand how to crack the UPSC examination in the first attempt itself. It will be an enlightening session. It will help you to understand everything in a better way itself. So I hope that you have noted this date. If you're in Hyderabad, we will come to other cities. We started with Bangalore. We will come to other cities. The success of these sessions matter to us because it is the love which we get from you which comes out in these seminars. Thereafter, the PDF of this session, yesterday's session has also been uploaded now, will be in this Telegram channel. There was a certain glitch which did not allow me to upload the PDF yesterday on Telegram, but it has been uploaded today morning, and I will do that for the same as soon as the PDF is available to me also. Okay, with this, let's talk about the 8 topics we discussed today. And we have an interesting set of topics because they look very easy prima facie, but are very, very complex in the larger context of a preparation. First is the UGC VC appointment controversy. A very interesting topic, is very straightforward, but actually has a lot of layers inside it. Thereafter, we'll talk about IMEC, which is the Middle East corridor, and how India, in a way, gets a boost through that. Thereafter, we'll talk about Capex. This is something we discussed yesterday with regards to the data which came from the government of India with regards to private investment. Then a Niti Aayog report, and most probably there will be an updation of the SC, ST and OBC lists because 179 groups will be updated in that regard. Further, finally, the day is here. The 47th President of the United States of America has been sworn in. Trump, as soon as he became president, in his speech has talked about multiple things which are quite concerning for the world. We'll talk about that. Then 2 basic articles related to EVs and the government, and a call for the Ministry of Senior Citizens, an opinion which would matter for you also. So we have, you can say, 8 topics, out of which the first one is the most, you can say, depth-based, has a lot of layers. Thereafter, it becomes easier and easier and simpler. So I will try to concentrate on the mains-based, you can say, layered topics, and thereafter we'll go into basic discussions of the other. Good morning. Can I start, everyone? Yes. Okay. So the first topic is about a certain regulation which is in the news, which is related to the UGC. Now, UGC I previously also discussed with you, the University Grants Commission. But the regulation in question is called Regulation 7.3. Now, first, let me set the context for you. The context of the controversy in Punjab, in Tamil Nadu, and as of right now, there's actually a proper standoff between the Tamil Nadu government and the UGC. 6 Tamil Nadu universities do not have, Tamil Nadu state universities, remember, do not have vice chancellors or VCs at this point of time. And this is because of the disagreement between the governor and the state government over the power to appoint VCs itself. This problem actually comes through because of a UGC regulation, which has been recently, in a way, brought in under the UGC Regulations Act of 2018, where the governor, along with other members, need to have one nominated member of the UGC in the search committee of a VC, meaning VC, if he be appointed in the search committee under Regulation 7.3, UGC says we should have one representative in that search committee. This is the first point. However, the state governments say that this is an overreach by the UGC because under the State Universities Act, be it Punjab, be it Tamil Nadu, the search committee does not need to have a UGC member. Rather, the chancellor, which is basically the governor of the state itself, plus the Senate and the syndicate, which is basically the governing body of the university itself, they should be there. So the question which arises over Regulation 7.3 is, governor's role is not questioned, which is governor as the chancellor, ex officio chancellor of a state university. Governor plus search committee is the question. Governor's role is well defined, but the search committee, UGC says that UGC should have one member, while the state government are saying there is no need for a UGC member in this search committee because that is in a way an overreach by the UGC. UGC being a central body. On the other hand, this is about state autonomy. So basically, it comes to center-state relationship. And though this topic looks very straightforward in prima facie face value, has a lot of layers, and I'll try to deconstruct that properly. First things first, you should know that the University Grants Commission was established in 1953. It's a statutory organization. It's an executive body created by an Act of Parliament in 1956. And therefore, the UGC Act of 1956 is basically the power where it draws all the different what we call as regulations, rules, and it is to determine, coordinate and maintain teaching standards, examination and research standards in India. So basically, whenever it comes to central and state universities, specifically central universities, UGC has a lot of say. And on the other hand, state universities, UGC also in a way is a guiding light when it comes to teaching and curricula. Two things need to be understood. VC, Vice Chancellor appointment is the question. Governor's role is not questioned as the ex-officio Chancellor of the state itself. What is questioned on the other hand is, should UGC member be there in the search committee or not? UGC from the outset is a statutory body. It executes a certain act and is a central body created by an Act of Parliament, and therefore we are now going to enter into something which is the legislative jurisdiction aspect here, because there's a lot to be unpacked here. So I hope that you understand the context. The controversy is, should a UGC member be there in the search committee for VC? Now, we all know how legislative jurisdiction is created. First created in the Government of India Act 1919. We have three lists. One is called the state list, the union list, and the concurrent list. Pay attention. This is basic static polity, which is state list, union list, concurrent list. The things which are listed under, or the subjects which are listed under the state list, the state has a jurisdiction to make laws on it. The things or the subjects which are listed under the union list, this is the place where the union government or the central government has the power to make laws. But there are certain areas which intersect between the two, and that is the concurrent list. The concurrent list sits between the state list and the union list, where concurrent, both the union and the state have the power to make laws in. Very straightforward. Education, which we are discussing, is in the concurrent list. Education comes under the concurrent list. Therefore, both union and state have the power to make laws on education. Now, the question which arises is, if education is in the concurrent list, and this is a standard question which you will get, is that if union makes a law and state makes a law in concurrent list, which law will become void and which law will be considered to supersede the other one? The union list or the union law or the state law? If both union and state make a law on education under the constitutional mandate, under concurrent list, which law will supersede the other one? And the answer to that question is very simple and straightforward. The central law will supersede the state law. The union law is going to supersede the state law. This is what is called as basic polity, but the problem is we are oversimplifying, because there's a concept of delegated legislation and the concept of plenary or plenary law. Before I move further, one thing should be very clear. We have three lists: union, state, concurrent. And union, state have their own jurisdictions. Concurrent list, state and the union both can legislate upon. And prima facie, what you will find in standard books, they will say this line, that union law will supersede the state law, but they don't talk about one more layer which exists, which is the language of that law matters and what type of law it is. So first, what I want from you is a confirmation that you understand these three lists and the idea that union law is going to supersede the state law under 254(1) of the Indian Constitution, which I will discuss with you. If I can get a yes here, that yes, we are sorted, we understand these three concepts, which is state, union and concurrent list, and the union will always supersede the state one. Okay, we understand this. But if you actually read Article 254(1), which says that a union law will supersede a state law in concurrent list, there's a very important line or a word which is written before that. The line says that plenary laws of the parliament supersedes plenary laws of the state. Now the question is, what is this word plenary mean? What does this mean? Now, in legal terms, there are two types of laws which can come through. One is called plenary and the other one is called delegated or subordinate law. Now, if a law is passed by both the houses plus gets the assent from the president, and if the law is passing through this state legislative assembly, if they have a Vidhan Sabha, the Vidhan Sabha plus Vidhan Parishad both, and then gets the assent of the governor, this law is called plenary law, which is a legislative body created a law through due process of law itself. Meaning, think of it like a law which is complete in itself. The plenary power is that this law is complete, this law is absolute, and therefore it has gone through the process of legislative, what we call as churn, and it has followed the due process of law. However, there is one more type of law which is called delegated or subordinate law. Delegated and subordinate law is a law or rule or regulation passed by a body which is not a legislative body. Meaning, this kind of law comes out of a overreach, or you can say comes out of a process where an executive in the process of meeting a certain requirement under the act or under the law it was created. It is a statutory body, but in order to meet certain requirements, it has to produce certain regulations and laws. That is called a subordinate law. Meaning the executive gets the power to introduce a law as a part of its, you can say, function, and as part of its concept of, in a way, covering something which is its jurisdiction or is required to be done. So in this case, for example, State Universities Acts are a plenary law, which is it is passed by the State Legislative Assembly, given assent by the governor, and therefore a State Universities Act is produced. On the other hand, Regulation 7.3, which we are talking about, is a delegated or subordinate law, in the sense that the UGC is a statutory body. It was created by the Parliament itself. Now, in order to meet the requirements of its functions, it is introducing regulations which in a way have the power as a law or a rule. Therefore, it is a delegated law itself. So therefore, we have one set of laws which are plenary, we have one set of laws which are called delegated or subordinate law, laws which are made by an entity other than a legislature. Now, this is the basic premise on which this whole article is based on. We all understand that in the concurrent list, the central law is going to supersede the state law. But in 254(1), there is no mention of delegated law. Meaning, as per the reading of the Constitution, for which Supreme Court has given multiple types of judgments, sometimes contradictory, it should mean, and it has meant in multiple cases, that a plenary law can supersede a plenary law. However, it does not mean that a delegated law of the center will supersede over a plenary law of the state. And this is a very interesting question which now comes out of this whole controversy itself. The controversy therefore is, can UGC's regulation framed by UGC chairman and his 10 members supersede the provisions of State Universities Law or Act, which is a plenary law and therefore got assent from the governor or the president? Therefore, it becomes a question of larger center-state relationship. Can a delegated legislation, rules, regulations, notifications, framed by a union government or its agency supersede or override the provisions of a plenary state law? Basically, we know that central law supersedes state law when it comes to concurrent list. But if I add one more step or layer to it, can plenary law of the center supersede the plenary law of the state? Yes. However, does a delegated law which comes out of a union agency then supersede a plenary law of the state? Is the matter of question on which we have multiple judgments, and the Supreme Court itself has created a confusing order in which in multiple cases it had said no, but in certain cases it had said yes. Therefore, this topic, which looks very easy and very straightforward prima facie, has a very important question of the basic structure. Because this controversy is now about center-state relationship, is about federalism, and therefore the Supreme Court now has to give clarity over this concept, because it is straightforward delegated law versus a plenary law. So again, I'm going to ask you one thing. What I've taught you till this point is only three things, which is UGC 7.3 regulation has been in the news. Second, there is Article 254(1) of the Constitution, which says that under concurrent list conflict between union and state, there will be the union law is going to supersede the state law. However, there is one more layer to it, that if we read it properly, if we read that regulation properly, we will see that it says plenary law versus plenary law. However, the question is, can a delegated law therefore supersede a plenary law? Plenary laws are produced by a legislative body through due process of law. On the other hand, a delegated law comes out of a union or state, a union agency, which was created through an act, be it a statutory body, and therefore the regulations are delegated. An executive is producing a law in order to meet its requirements. Are we sorted with regards to these three concepts? If we are, then I move to the next step, which is Now try to understand what has the Supreme Court argued about this over different judgments which have been given over different periods of time. Are we all on the same page regards to what is plenary, what is delegated, what is concurrent list, education in concurrent list, and what is the controversy here? What is the core question here? I want everybody's consent here. Yes, sir, we understand it. Then I will move further to the second part of this discussion on what is the Supreme Court's understanding here. We understand it. Senate and syndicate are part of the search committee. They are just basically bodies which are produced by the state government as subject experts. That's it. Okay. Now, Article 254(1) of the Constitution addresses the conflict between center and state laws. It states that if a state law is repugnant to a central law on matters of concurrent list, the central law will prevail and the state law will become null and void. Basically, what I argued, but it is plenary law of the center over plenary law of the state. This is the idea here. Now, what is the Supreme Court's argument in multiple concepts? Plenary law is produced by a legislative process, by a legislature, be it state or center. Delegated law is produced by an executive body trying to do its job, and therefore it is an executive producing a regulation or rule or law in order to meet its requirement. It is absolute. A plenary law is absolute. On the other hand, a delegated law is produced by a body which is delegated this responsibility to the act through which it was produced. Very simple, straightforward. If it is produced through the process of Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha and President, or State Legislative Assembly and Governor, it is a plenary law. It is absolute, complete in itself, because the way a law needs to be produced is produced. On the other hand, when we talk about delegated law is produced by a body which is not not a legislative body. Any law produced by an entity which is not a legislative body is called a delegated law. To just repeat myself, because some of you are asking that. Okay. Now, what has the Supreme Court argued? The Supreme Court has given multiple judgments here, and there are 3 sets of judgments which have come through. Initially, and this has to be learned because this will help you in the examination, because it's a question of center and state and federalism and basic structure, it becomes important. Under Chaudhary Tikha Ramji versus State of Uttar Pradesh 1956, the Supreme Court, when it came to Sugarcane Control Order 1955 and Essential Commodities Acts 1955, straightforward said that the power of repeal, if any, was vested in the Parliament, and the Parliament alone could exercise it by enacting an appropriate provision. Therefore, Parliament could not delegate this power to repeal to an executive authority. Therefore, what Tikha Ramji versus State of Uttar Pradesh argues is that delegated law cannot supersede a plenary law if it is coming from the state. So understand this point. We are arguing that the UGC has no jurisdiction to say to state universities, have one member. Regulation 7.3 is problematic because a delegated law is now trying to supersede a plenary law produced by the state. So therefore, if the state of Tamil Nadu courts Chaudhary Tikha Ramji versus State of Uttar Pradesh, what we call as judgment, it will say that this regulation is a UGC overreach because delegated law cannot supersede a plenary law. Even in the Indian Express newspaper versus Union of India case and JK Industries versus Union of India case, in all the same conclusion came, which is delegated law cannot in a way supersede a plenary law. Even in the concurrent list, the idea is very simple. You cannot have a delegated law of the center supersede a plenary law. A plenary law of the center can only supersede a plenary law of the state. It has to be a plenary law, which is a law which has followed due process of law itself. It has gone through all the stages of it being enacted. Therefore, very simply, the Supreme Court initially created this precedence that delegated laws of the executives, which is also a question of separation of power, where an executive is producing a law, cannot be superseding a law which is produced by the state through its due process. Now, if this was so straightforward, then by this point of time, this controversy would have gone out. Everybody would have quoted the 254(1) and everybody would have said that UGC is overreaching in saying that a UGC member should be there in the search party of a vice chancellor in the state. Now, prima facie, it seems that regulation 7.3 is problematic because it goes against the basic, you can say, spirit of 254(1). But if we try to scratch the surface further, it seems that the UGC has overreached just not beyond 254(1), but it also has no jurisdiction over the vice chancellor of a state. Meaning, see, UGC can dictate curricula, can dictate teaching staff, regulations, and what we call as qualifications. Vice chancellor is not considered a teaching staff. Vice chancellor is considered to be a administrative staff of a university. Therefore, UGC as it is has no jurisdiction over vice chancellor appointment. Therefore, VCs are not teaching staff. Therefore, there is no jurisdiction of the UGC over the VC itself. Second, it has been argued again by the Supreme Court in the University of Delhi versus Raj Singh case in 1994 that the recommendations of the UGC are advisory over central universities and state universities. It is not a mandatory provision. There is a fear and there is a chance that you would lose UGC funding or UGC aid, but UGC cannot mandatorily make somebody do something. This has been argued by the University of Delhi versus Raj Singh case in 1994 that it has advisory jurisdiction, not a mandatory jurisdiction over the center and the state universities. Therefore, if the funding is stopped, that is the power of the UGC, but the UGC cannot make, in a way, the laws of the state itself when it comes to state universities itself, and cannot dictate things. It can only advise the state university. Therefore, the presence of the member in the search committee for the VC is again what is called as ultra vires. Ultra vires is beyond the scope of the powers of the UGC. The first question was that, is it constitutionally mandated that UGC can supersede the state government of Tamil Nadu? Under 254(1), seems prima facie that is not the case, because delegated law cannot be taking over a plenary law of the state. On the other hand, if we go a step further, we will realize that UGC as it is has no jurisdiction over the VC, because VC is not a teaching staff. Further, UGC has only advisory jurisdiction as said by the Supreme Court in University of Delhi versus Raj Singh case. Now, this tells us very clearly that this tussle is correct. This tussle is correct, and this is central overreach over state. Therefore, comes the concept of federalism. This is a tendency where a central body is trying to overreach into state governments, you can say, jurisdiction and law, and therefore there is a problem. There is a problem. Now, if this was again so easy, if I can argue, then this controversy would automatically be done. This is where the article points out that there is some confusion which the Supreme Court itself has created. This concept seems very easy prima facie. How can UGC ask VCs to be appointed? This is what Stalin is saying. This is what the CM of Tamil Nadu is saying, that how can UGC be present in state universities VC appointment? We said the idea is very simple. It's an overreach. But does the if the state government has judgments to support their argument, then the center also somehow has certain judgments to support it. This is where we have three sets of regulations which are complicating this issue, and therefore the intervention of the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court is important, because this is now questioning the basic structure, which is the federal structure of the Indian Constitution, because this is not just about VC's appointment, it is about delegated law or delegated law from the center superseding the state plenary law under the concept of 254(1) of the Constitution. Now, there is whole one set of, you can say, judgments. Annamalai University versus Secretary Information and Tourism, State of Bengal versus Sundar Das 2022. You have Gavdi versus State of Gujarat 2022. We have Srijit versus Dr. Rajshri 2022. The Supreme Court straightforward held without articulating reasons why once UGC regulations are laid before both the houses of the parliament, they become part of the UGC Act, and therefore it argues that once it has been passed by the center via the legislative process, then that regulation becomes part of the UGC Act. Therefore, a delegated law, if it goes through its process of due process of law, which is the what we call as Raj Sabha, Lok Sabha and President, then it becomes a plenary law, and therefore it can supersede a plenary law of the state itself. On the other hand, in Kalyani Mathivan versus Jairaj 2015, Supreme Court gave an contrary argument in that regard, which is the same rationale had been undercut. The same rationale had been undercut, under which it said that if the state itself has not adopted the amended regulations, the same cannot be applied to the institute. Now, basically, what this set of judgments say, even if a delegated law becomes a plenary law through the process of Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha and the President, only when this plenary law is adopted by the state law, then only it can supersede the state law itself. This is where there's a whole confusion being created by the Supreme Court. The interpretation of the UGC regulation lose their subordinate character and automatically become part of the parent act merely being laid before the parliament itself is the question. And again, there is a judgment under the Constitution or General Clauses Act that will not happen. A delegated law, I'll give you a summary for this, don't worry. A delegated law automatically does not become part of a parent law if it has been passed before the parliament. And therefore, we have enough what we call as precedents to say that a subordinate law remains a subordinate law even if it has been passed by a process of what we call as a due process of law itself. Now, before I go to the way forward here, let's try to understand what is actually happening. What is actually happening? Let me summarize all of this in a very simple, straightforward manner. There are three aspects here very clearly. The first aspect is there's a regulation 7.3. Now pay attention. Regulation 7.3 of the UGC, which has been passed under the concept of the UGC Act of 1956 and 2018, under which it says that there needs to be a member of the UGC in the search committee of the VC. That is the least of your concerns here. The simple point is state laws do not mandate that. The state universities law do not mandate that. But UGC is saying because we have passed a regulation, it is a tussle between the UGC regulation 7.3 and versus state universities acts, which say that the search committee does not need to have a central member. This is the core issue here. But the problem here comes through, it's not just about regulation versus state law. It becomes a question between delegated law versus plenary law. Can a delegated law supersede a plenary law when it comes to the concurrent list, when it comes to education, when it comes to UGC superseding state universities acts in that regard? Now, if I go by the constitutional mandate under 254(1), it says plenary law defeats plenary law. Simple. A plenary law defeats plenary law, and therefore union plenary law will succeed over a state law. However, it also does not talk about delegated law, so there is a little bit of scope for interpretation. So therefore, when the Supreme Court, when it came to the, you have Tika Ji case, I'll just write Tika plus Indian Express case plus the JK Industries case. In all these three cases, the Supreme Court upheld that a delegated law is null and void in front of a plenary law of the state, and therefore plenary cuts plenary is the basic logic which has been given. Delegated law cannot defeat a plenary law of the state itself. However, when it comes to the UGC jurisdiction itself, there is one more set of argument which is given, is that, okay, if a delegated law is passed through the parliament, meaning UGC Act is there of 1956 and 2018, what if regulation 7.3, which is a delegated law, is passed by the Lok Sabha, passed by the Raj Sabha, and then goes to the president, president gives assent, and then it becomes part of the UGC Act of 1956 and 2018 as an amendment. Then can regulation 7.3 supersede what is called as the plenary law of the State Universities Act? Here we have two types of judgments. One judgment says yes, the other judgment says no. In one judgment, it says that delegated law remains delegated law. The other set of judgments say no, delegated law, if passed through the due process of law, becomes a plenary law. Therefore, plenary law defeats plenary law. So you remember it like this, like in chess, plenary defeats plenary, delegated does not defeat plenary, but if delegated goes through the process of law making, then it becomes a plenary law. Therefore, plenary defeats plenary. But the problem is we have now contradictory jurisdictions and contradictory, you can say, judgments. One set of judgments say if delegated goes through the process of law, it becomes plenary. Therefore, plenary defeats plenary. On the other hand, there's one set of laws which says no, or one set of judgments which say as much as it can go through the process of what we call as delegated being made into plenary, it will still remain. A legislation which is subordinate will always remain subordinate even if it is passed by the parliament itself. Now, therefore, it is not for you and me to decide this, and the argument which is given by the article is there's a need for the Supreme Court Constitution bench to take a stand on this, because what does Article 254(1) entail? And what is this concept needs to be properly defined, because it is not just about the UGC, it is about a bigger issue of basic structure. Simple, straightforward concept is we know plenary defeats plenary, delegated law does not defeat plenary law, but if delegated law goes through process of lawmaking, which passes through Lok Sabha, Raj Sabha and the parliament, and then into the president's assent, then does it become a plenary law and then can defeat a plenary law of the state itself. This is actually a very complex topic. It's a very, very complex topic. More than that, you can get a question like this. It's a pure GS paper 2 question, a very difficult question to answer if you have no idea about this. The idea is the recent controversy with regards to UGC regulations need the attention of the Constitution bench, as there are important implications with regards to basic structures embedded in this issue. Meaning, you cannot write an answer for this if you do not know what is 254(1), if you do not know what is the concurrent list, if you do not know what is plenary law and delegated law, if you do not know what are the judgments related to it. So it is a very complex topic. Just keep it simple. Plenary defeats plenary under 254(1). The idea is we have judgments which say yes, delegated laws don't defeat plenary law. However, we have also judgments which say delegated law going through a process of lawmaking in turn becomes a plenary law. Therefore, it can then defeat the plenary law of the state itself. How do we decide that? You and me don't decide that. The Supreme Court has to do it. So I hope that you understand it. I told you this topic is a little bit difficult. It has a little bit of layering inside it. Just need to focus. That's it. So I hope PL defeats PL, DL becomes PL. Does it defeat a PL is the question. It is violating, if the delegated law is defeating the plenary law, it is unconstitutional in a way, because thereafter an executive body law is defeating the law made by a due process of law itself. Therefore, the basic structure of federalism is questioned, and therefore it becomes a larger issue of federalism, about the concept of center-state relationships, about 254(1). If you did not understand this, though I've been repeating and being very, 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 you can say, detailed in that matter, just go through this video again. This part you will understand it. Just have to understand what is plenary and what is delegated. Okay. I'll move further now because this was the topic I told you which has a lot of layers, was difficult to understand. Now let's talk about a very simple, straightforward topic, not something out of the box, which is with Donald Trump taking oath as the next president of the United States of America, we have a very interesting, you can say, route called IMEC, IMEC, which these two authors argue is very, very important. Now, what is IMEC, which is India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor? So it starts from Mumbai via UAE into Saudi Arabia, into Israel, then to Greece. This route, which involves India as a partner, US as a coordinating partner, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Italy, France, Germany, and the European Commission, IMEC is considered to be a very, very, very important alternative to a route which goes from here, which is called the Suez Canal. So with regards to what has recently happened with Suez Canal piracy and Suez Canal blockades, and even the Suez Canal getting blocked, for at least 2 to 3 years, there has been a UN cry that there needs to be an alternative for the Suez Canal when it comes to going from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. And therefore, IMEC was something which the US and India, along with France and Germany, France and India were the ones who actually pioneered this route in that regard, has a maritime component, has a rail link component. But the concept was very simple, that IMEC could be a very important addition into the world of what we today call as alternative routes. So this article argues that as of right now, it's a very simple, straightforward article. As of right now, IMEC has been more conceptual rather than having clarity and being more concrete. Meaning, IMEC is a good idea. But the problem is when it comes to cooperation, planning, digital infrastructure, physical infrastructure, it is mostly absent. And therefore, if IMEC is being produced and is being envisaged as a concept which can counter the Belt and Road Initiative of China, is an alternative to the Suez Canal, is an alternative to any form of Chinese presence in this sector, there needs to be concrete steps taken, and that too very quickly. So what are the steps which are needed to make IMEC not just from a conceptual understanding into a reality? First is cooperation, which somehow as of right now is lacking, because here the international interest has to be balanced with the domestic interest, and therefore the cooperation aspect is important, with UAE, Saudi Arabia involved, with Greece involved, with the European Union involved. But Israel part of this story is more critical, because Israel is involved along with Jordan in this whole sector. Therefore, there's a need for better cooperation and safety of movement of goods and services along this corridor, which is not guaranteed as of right now. The second thing which they argue is that if this is an alternative road to the Belt and Road Initiative and the Suez Canal itself, investment, political and economic interests have to be aligned, which technically aren't as of right now, because political interests are in a different space itself and economic interests are in a different space itself. And because of this mismatch, private investment, which is going to be a very important component of this whole IMEC corridor itself, is absent. And therefore, what is needed is cooperation, capacity building, and confidence building in the private sector, that IMEC is not going to become like the Belt and Road Initiative, fraught with multiple problems and security issues. And therefore, what this article argues is that with Donald Trump coming into the picture, Biden supported IMEC. Trump has always looked forward. He's going to undo what is happening in the Panama Canal itself. India should bat for the IMEC to be an alternative to the Chinese in this sector. And with Trump coming into the picture, the argument is we have to prioritize IMEC it is in America's best interest, but also in India's best interest also. So it is not something out of the box which they give as an argument, but you can get a question like this in the examination. That is why we're having this discussion. The IMEC project is a viable and crucial alternative to the Suez Canal and also allows India to counter the Belt and Road Initiative comment. So you just have to talk about the route, how does it do that, but also have to talk about how cooperation, coordination, and confidence building is something which is needed. France has been extremely proactive here. They have delegated one specific envoy for this also. But the idea is with Israel's involvement and with regards to these UAE and Saudi Arabia being there and the tensions in this sector, there's a little bit of more capacity building which is needed, and security issues have to be resolved in that regard. So I hope that this simple straightforward topic is also sorted for you. Can I move to the next topic now? First topic, as I told you, heavy. These are very simple straightforward articles which were there in the news itself. Second point is very simply the idea that investment, political and economic interests have to come together, which is not there. Political interests in this sector are actually placed in a different place altogether. Economic interests are aligned, but political interests aren't. Okay. Moving one step further, we had discussed a certain, you can say, data yesterday, if you remember. This was what I showed you yesterday. Now we have an editorial on this, which is that private investment in India for Q3 has gone into the negative, minus 1.41% quarter-on-quarter growth. On the other hand, public spending is increasing. Private spending is nothing as compared to the public spending as of right now happening. 3.29% vis-a-vis 2.75% growth quarter-on-quarter between Q2 and Q3. Now, the article, what it tries to give you is reasons. So therefore, this is an update for you with regards to the reasons and the solutions so that we can come out of this mess. The reasons which are given for what we call as Q2, Q3 negative investment Capex, which is capital expenditure or capital investment by the private sector, is firstly global uncertainties that cannot be changed by India itself. With regards to Russia, Ukraine, we have the issues related to Israel. The whole of what we call as the Middle East itself is destabilized in that regard. We have now Trump coming through. We have rupee sliding down with regards to the US itself. The input costs are going up with energy prices going up. Inflation is becoming a bigger issue. And what is even more problematic is with inflation going to a certain point, demand is falling. Consumption is falling. Demand in lucrative urban markets is shrinking. And therefore, everybody can see that there's a certain recessionary trend which is coming through. With consumption falling, there is a problem that private consumption is falling. Therefore, the investment by the private sector itself is reflecting that type of sentiment. Now, during that period, public spending is always important, which is public spending tries to match and in a way break through from this slowdown. But if this much amount of public spending is made by the state and the center, it would in turn lead to issues related to fiscal, what we call as deficits. And more than that, private capital has to be spent over and above the concept of public capital. Meaning, if the public spending keeps on going up and up and up and private spending goes down with private consumption, it will in turn push us into a space where this will go into what we call as deflationary trend, into a deflationary spiral, because private consumption has to independently come up in order to become more and more what we call as fiscally sound, because the state cannot spend beyond a certain point. Now, what is the solution to bringing in more private investment? Obviously, most of these issues are coming from unemployment, and therefore government has to push in for better jobs, newer jobs, and has to create assets which can create more jobs. That is good. But the budget has to do something to boost income and consumption. Maybe tax cuts will allow people to have more money at their disposable income. for the disposal. That in turn may translate into more consumption. But the idea is very simple. This is not a good trend. You will get more and more articles about this. This is not a good trend, and to arrest this, public spending is not the solution. We have to create space in which people have more money at their disposable income at their disposal. The idea is very simple. Because inflation is rising, prices are rising, people's consumption capacity is going down, demand is going down, private investment is negative, and therefore this could become a recessionary trend very quickly, a slowdown which cannot be arrested by just public spending. So in the yesterday's article, we tried to understand the data. Today we are trying to understand the reasons and the solutions, which I hope you will note and give any answer for the question which I gave you yesterday. You can write this type of solutions and reasons for it. So I hope that this is also sorted, how consumption, income have to be taken into consideration. Be it GST reform, be it income tax reform, be it some form of tax relief, disposable income needs to be increased so that consumption goes up. Okay. Thereafter, we go into a very interesting process or a very interesting activity which was done in the past 2 to 3 years. Now, in one of the largest ethnographic studies, which is to understand the cultures of India, the Anthropological Survey of India and the Tribal Research Institute, under the aegis and under commissioned by the Niti Aayog, they have for the first time done a comprehensive categorization of the tribes and castes of India, specifically the tribes. But within tribes, they have been able to categorize 268 denotified, meaning previously they were tribes, then denotified, semi-nomadic, which is they are moving in and around but also settled down, and nomadic tribes that previous commissions believed to have never classified itself. Meaning, in order to be classified as ST, in order to be classified as SC, in order to be classified as OBC, you need to be identified by the government and its commission as a classified scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, or other backward caste. This had created gaps. 268 categories of denotified, semi-nomadic, and nomadic tribes previously left out by different commissions have now been identified. A 3-year-long study has now recommended that 179 of these communities should be pushed into scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward castes as listed under the 26 states and central lists, and at least 85 of these 179 are fresh additions. This is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting that for the first time we have been able to identify 85 new groups which should be pushed into SC, ST and other backward, what we call as classes list of the 26 states and union territories. This is very, very interesting that way. We have not seen this. We had basically the commissions which previously had tried to notify or classify had used colonial lists. 268 such denotified, semi-nomadic and nomadic tribes were not talked about. Now they have been categorized, and 85 new additions will happen into SC, ST and OBC. If we go a step further, out of these 85, 46 will be recommended for OBC status, 29 for SC status, and 10 for ST status. Out of this, what is the location of these tribes? The fresh additions, 19 from Uttar Pradesh highest, followed by Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, MP and Rajasthan with 8888 each. And apart from these fresh additions, the committee has also recommended correcting the categorization of 9 communities which were categorized in SC, ST wrongly, and found that many of the 268 communities which have already been characterized either in state list or mentioned in central list need to be pushed out of these lists and put in the right list itself. So either they have been characterized partially in the state list, central list, or neither in that regard. Therefore, the argument which has been pushed by the Niti Aayog is we are still waiting for the full report. But this is very interesting. This is called the decolonization of a space which had been in a way dominated by colonial knowledge. For a very long time, we used to use the list which the British produced. But the British never understood these tribes in that regard. This list will be in more news. You will get a lot of editorials on this. The idea is Anthropological Survey of India and Tribes Research Institutes have now able to identify 85 communities which were previously should have been part of either OBC, SC, ST, but have not been. This is where this article becomes interesting and in a way significant. We will wait for further, you can say, news on this, but I wanted to discuss this with you that we still have a lot of things which need to be re-understood, reorganized, redesigned and reshaped. That is where it is quite significant and important in the larger understanding of our preparation. Moving further, we finally have Trump back. Trump is now the 47th US president. If he doesn't amend the Constitution of the United States of America, this should be his last stint also, because after 2 terms, it is not allowed in the US Constitution for anybody to be president. But you never know with Trump. As it is in his swearing in ceremony, there have been multiple red flags which have been pointed out, multiple red flags within the first thing which he said as president of the United States of America. Now we have multiple issues which are going to now come up again. First, he argued that he is going to do under the National Emergency Clause, immediately do multiple things. First, Mexico border will be in a way pushed from a state of what we call as normancy into national emergency, and immigrants will be deported. He will call the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. Sure. He will also amend the Panama Canal Act. If you remember, I discussed it with you previously. Panama Canal Authority has allowed Chinese to develop two ports just at the mouth of the Panama Canal itself. He is saying that I will change that. I will change the name also. Will make the international community change the name also. He will also send all the illegal immigrants out of America itself. He will stop all forms of censorship. If that is not enough, he has argued that from today, only 2 genders will be identified by the government of USA, male and female. If that was not enough, he has also argued that we will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. As soon as he became president, something which he had come out of, Biden has pushed back. Now he's again saying nobody is going to comply with the Paris Climate Accord and the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. We are going to come out of it, and we will intensify the drilling of oil and gas production in America itself. We will remove the mandate for electric vehicles in America. So now I leave it to you how to assess all of this. Gendered, environmental and geopolitical. Everywhere he has now made statements which are going to have a rippling effect. Leave the Paris Climate Agreement, only 2 genders, stop all censorship, national emergency on Mexico border, build the wall, Panama Canal Authority, renaming of a Gulf. Further, they will say we don't believe in climate change. America is going to reach to its highest stage of production of crude oil and non-renewable energy. So, interesting. With Trump, we'll have some news about him for sure, and you will get a lot of negative articles about him in the newspaper very quickly with regards to the editorials, how all of these things have implication. But he has been quote unquote good for India vis-a-vis bilateral relationship. Let's see how that also pans out. But just wanted to give you an update. He's back. He's back, and he's back with a bang. So let's make America great again. And therefore, let's see what happens. But yeah, he is saying that I'm going to be the harbinger of change, harbinger of peace. He will sort out Russia-Ukraine. He will sort out the Israel-Palestine issue itself. He will sort out all the world issues as of right now. His approach towards China is equally interesting and important, and therefore God bless America. Okay, Let's move on further to two very simple, straightforward articles. One thing is clear, that with 1.5 degrees Celsius being breached by the world itself, a climate denier is now in office. US will now take a step back. What do we do about 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius? Now, for in that case, God bless the world. With regards to the insurrections, the first thing which he has done is a presidential pardon has been given to all men and women who were prosecuted for the insurrection on 6th January and now have been given a pardon and left free, saying that they did what they did because I told them to do it. He's also the first felon to be a president of the United States of America. So United States of America setting the example for the world itself. Okay. Now the Supreme Court has, in a way, in an oral, you can say, argument, said to the center and specifically to Delhi authorities, why is there so much confusion in Delhi when it comes to parking laws? Now, there's nothing out of the box here, but just to tell you basic things, what the Supreme Court has argued is that there are more cars in Delhi than sometimes men and women, and with no parking available and parking done on streets, how is that we have not capped the number of cars which a person can buy, and people can only buy cars if they have space to park it? This should be made mandatory. Further, they have said that the government should not buy what we call as petrol or diesel cars, should buy EVs. So the public authorities should mandatorily buy EVs, for which the argument has been given that that has to be balanced. But because of the pollution aspect, the Supreme Court has said need a parking law in India, need a parking law in Delhi, need certain capping of cars on the people with regards to maybe at least parking spots itself, and the government has to take initiative to buy EV cars. But the question is that the EVs are charged by thermal power plant electricity, so it is not that sustainable. But the argument is we need to do something about it. Nothing really has been argued in this. Supreme Court, in an oral order, has said these things, has not put it on paper. Let us see what happens. But the hearings are going on with regards to what the Delhi government and the central government is doing for the situation of air pollution in Delhi. Again, interesting solutions coming through. You can talk about this as a solution, which is public authorities buying EVs if EV electricity is produced by renewable energy. Last but not the least, there has been a plea in the Supreme Court that there should be a specific ministry for the senior citizens. So Ministry of Senior Citizens should be produced. An important data which is given here is that 10.5% of the Indian population in 2022 was above the age of 60 years. Therefore, the aging report of 2023 had a significant way of telling us that there is a there's close to what we call as 149 million people in India who are above the age of 60. There was the Supreme Court has outrightly denied that it cannot tell the government to create a new ministry. That is not the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court itself. It said that we cannot necessitate and say to the state that please start a new ministry itself. But it said that the government of India will recognize the importance of this and may designate a new ministry. The idea is now there's a new concept which is being pushed with a higher aging population in India, that at least a ministry, if we can have child and women development, we can also have a ministry of senior citizens. This is a good, interesting idea which you can put in as a good solution for issues related to essay and ethics. So you can also note this in your larger preparation. So on this note, I'll try to wrap up this session. The simple point of this discussion was that today we had a very heavy discussion in the first topic with regards to 254(1), what is plenary law, what is delegated law, what is the concept of plenary defeating plenary, delegated, the due process of law, how laws are to be understood. I hope that is sorted. If not, just go through the you can say discussion again. Just have to focus on the finer details which I pointed out. Some of you asked, were the judgments important? If you can note down the judgments, it will be good. That is why I'll give you this PPT in the group. It is important that you do note down the judgments. Thereafter, other IMEC is something which has been in the news. We discussed about that. Capex again in the news. We discussed about an update, reason and solution. And we also tried to understand how there's a very interesting survey happening in India. So I hope that this session has been enlightening, comprehensive enough. I will see you tomorrow with regards to another set of topics. Thank you. Take care and bye-bye.